Hello there. I was going to do this whole video in character as some collector of spooky and evil beings, but then I realised that that was a terrible idea. So instead, you're stuck with me, the laziest writer, and I'm here to tell you all about 10 terrifying monsters in family-friendly fiction. Just a heads up, I'm definitely going to drop some spoilers at some point in this video, but if you aren't aware of the events of the stories that I'm discussing, you can always use the timestamps listed in the comments to skip past the creatures in question. Also, this isn't a personal top 10 or anything, but just some examples that I think are worth mentioning, so if there's another monster that you think should have made the cut, please do let me know in the comments below. And without further ado, let's enter my marvellous emporium of foul creatures and vile beasts. Little bit left over from the in-character script there, and take a look at monster number 1. The first entry is this iconic terror from Guillermo del Toro's 2006 historical fantasy film Pan's Labyrinth. He's disturbing enough that he manages to stand out as truly horrific even amidst a movie full of not very YouTube-friendly folk.
The Germans?
But that's because, well, look at him. He eats kids. The bizarre setting that he occupies and his strange rules for the hero to follow really ensure that watching Pan's Labyrinth feels like being submerged in some ancient mythology. And the slow chase as he sluggishly follows Ophelia brings a sense of tension that a lot of all-out horror films really can't match up to. Add to that his simply grotesque design, and we get a dreadful glimpse at the dark side of the fantastical and supernatural world that Ophelia keeps escaping to. One that is reminiscent of, and therefore a corruption of, the childish beliefs in imaginary worlds that we too have held at times in our lives. The Pale Man therefore stands as an assault on our childhoods, which I think of as especially disturbing amidst the backdrop of an allegedly family-friendly film. Also released in 2006 is the animated kids horror movie Monster House, a film that really does what it says on the tin given that it revolves around a house that is a sentient monster. Side note, I'm just realising that this would make a great double bill with Disney Channel original movie Smart House, and that if you swap the titles of each film, they'd still be equally appropriate. Well anyway, what makes the eponymous Monster House so effective is the fact that monster houses have layers. And what begins as an eerie theory on the part of the protagonist is slowly but surely shown to be something spooky to the core. We begin by knowing that something is wrong with the house, and then that the house is alive, before we then come to understand more of what Old Man Nebbercracker knows about the history of his abode. And finally we are given access to the secret tomb at the heart of the home, and the terrors that lie within. We come to understand the story of Constance, and the love between misfits that took a tragic turn. Nebbercracker can't let go of the house, because it stands as the last living remnants of the love of his life, whilst the house violently defends him, in particular from the neighbourhood's troubling children, because in a world full of cruel kids who mocked Constance for her physical attributes, her husband was the only one who saw and treated her as a human being. I think that this sympathetic edge only makes the finale more dramatic, and offers a look into how the things and the people that we love might turn into the monsters of our lives. Most notably as Nebbercracker finally has to confront Constance after decades of nurturing her, and simply trying to scare away the children that might otherwise incite her violence. For me, this film again achieves something that most adult-facing horror cannot, except this time it's from the complete opposite angle. Sure, there are a plethora of attempts to create a sympathetic horror villain, but few do so nearly as well as Monster House's look at two victims given the power to exact their revenge. And also, you know, it's crazy creepy. And speaking of, so I was thinking of placing 6 from Little Nightmares on this list because, as you may know, I am obsessed with those games. In fact, I'd already lined up The Lady as a close runner-up, but unfortunately Little Nightmares isn't sold to small children, as fun and chaotic as that sounds, so it cannot go on this list. It did make me think about the patients from the hospital in Little Nightmares 2 though, and they in turn made me think of the notorious weeping angels from Doctor Who. But it couldn't be them, because they are nowhere near as terrifying as the most horrific monster from that show, which is still the empty child. The gas mask wearing undead little boy from a 2-part episode that debuted in May of 2005. Those empty eyes that bore into victims and viewers alike, the unravelling mystery of the missing mummy, and Dr. Constantine's admittedly dated but still rather chilling transformation before our eyes all contributed to the stark evolution of a sometimes spooky series into genuine full-blown horror. The simply disturbing, unerring repetition of "Are you my mummy?" still strikes fear into the hearts of anyone who saw this during their childhood. And that element in particular means that the missing tape scene alone is so effective as a means of exposition that transforms into terror. And unlike much of what we've seen before this point, the empty child, something that should be so meek and vanquishable, seems to have completely overwhelmed the Doctor, to the point where it seems like a genuine possibility, like Nancy says, that this historical setting is somehow the end of the world. And what's more terrifying than an entire Earth forced into becoming zombified monsters with a perpetual fear of their overwhelming loneliness, constantly searching for a mother who might not even exist? Well, according to the 5-year-old me, the answer is Emily Merrimack. This one might be a bit unfair, as Emily doesn't ever really harm anyone, and certainly doesn't have any ill intentions, but her emergence from the forest floor in Tim Burton's Corpse Bride is a scene that has always stuck with me for how effective it is at sending shivers down your spine. Also, she is, an undead corpse, so I'd say she's still earned her place on this list. She too has these giant, occasionally empty eyes, and her exposed ribs and spindly limbs give her that cartoonish yet unsettling quality as she looms over Victor Van Dort. She floats effortlessly through the forest like the unseen deadite from the Evil Dead franchise, and her lack of hurry against Victor's manic fleeing makes her seem inevitable. He has awoken something that he cannot escape, and which, at this time, he has absolutely no understanding of. She could want him dead, and in a way she does, seeking his eternal residence in the jazzy but still rather disturbing underworld. So I think it's fair that he's scared. For me, this pale ghost in the forest reminds me of the spirits of some all-time classic horror films, or the dreaded Noonwraiths and Plague Maidens from The Witcher, which mean that this scene still has a few qualities that are capable of making my skin crawl, even after all of these years and all of these viewings, far beyond what most 18-rated horror films have ever really managed. But then again, maybe it's just me. Either way, let's take a look at something a little lighter now. That's better. Pokemon are cute and innocent, right? Wrong! The world where parents are always sending their 10-year-old kids to go off and fight animals in the wild is, unsurprisingly, full of some pretty distressing stuff, and even some creatures that love to prey off the young and the innocent. People often say that the most horrific Pokemon is Mimikyu, which is so hideous as to kill you with shock if you see what lies beneath its homemade disguise, whilst others bring up Cubone, which allegedly wears its mother's skull on its head. But Mimikyu surely dons its crude costume so as to avoid hurting people, and Cubone wearing its mother's skull makes no sense at all, as the population would diminish with every generation if each Cubone couple could only have one kid to wear the skull that the mother has, which would presumably keep getting smaller each time, as the mothers themselves had to grow into the skull of the previous parent. I may have overthought this one. Other fans point to Yamask, which are seemingly not really Pokemon at all in the way that most people would think of them, but ghosts. Like proper human ghosts. Lost souls who cry uncontrollably when they see their own face, which they carry around in the form of a mask. And that's pretty dark. Just like Frostlass, who freezes her victims in blocks of ice that she neatly displays in a cave that she calls home. And who was created when a dying woman's regretful spirit possessed an icicle. And who knocks on people's doors during blizzards, presumably murdering anybody kind enough to offer her their help. Oh, and whose favourite food is human souls. Man, Pokemon is messed up. But none of these are as horrific as Drifloon, the creature who seems so innocent and kind and of course eats kids. Well, we don't actually know what it does with the bodies, but Drifloon is known to drift around trying to trick a child into thinking it's a regular balloon and to coax them into taking hold of it. It then carries them away, never to be seen again, but eventually returns slightly larger. This is because Drifloons are effectively big bags full of souls, and each time they consume another spirit, they grow slightly. Probably going to have to tell little Timmy's parents that their boy is gone for good. Also, this sentence. And there aren't any real horror elements present outside of the lore because, well, it's Pokemon. But the reason that Pokemon is so horrifying is the fact that there's no horror. You grow accustomed to these cuddly little creatures and then you find out that they're all secretly competing to see who can prey on people in the most disturbing manner. And as far as I'm concerned, these child-snatching, soul-feasting murder balloons are floating far, far above the rest of the competition. The other mother is the disguise adopted by a transmogrifying demon known as the Beldam in 2009's Neil Gaiman adaptation Coraline. She slowly lures in the titular character before kidnapping, transforming and trapping her parents, as well as stealing the souls of her victims because she's a demon. It's kind of what she does. But what makes her such an effective monster is not just her grim Ursula-like powers, her eerie and empty button eyes, or the evil intention beneath the surface, but the way that she hides or plays down each of those features. She pretends that she seeks to use her powers over this world for good, and that it's not even slightly weird that she has little plastic bits of clothing sewn over her eyes. She presents herself as better, more fun and more vibrant than Coraline's true family, and her method of luring in children before allowing them to know the mistake they have made, and of course the fate that they have secured for their parents, is so utterly sadistic and sinister that it outshines any of the other monsters on this list. Going beyond just invoking fear and actually having the guts to represent a level of cruelty that's going to stick with viewers of all ages is enough for me to have the other mother feature as one of the 10 terrifying monsters in family-friendly fiction. Also, again, I am just absolutely petrified. Let's move on, please. This next one was really unexpected, and for me stood out as one of the key reasons why I actually really enjoyed that franchise film that everyone hated this year. No, not that one. But yeah, the Therizinosaurus, and I'm not going to look up if that's actually how you pronounce it, sorry, really makes this film its own, not only by assassinating the Giganotosaurus, same caveat there, during the film's climax, but also in the scene where it stalks Claire with murderous intent. And also just entirely swats a deer for some reason. The fact that the beast is herbivorous rather than the usual big, toothy, carnivorous theropods that you can hardly move for in the Jurassic franchise really helps to freshen it up and inject a new type of fear that simply isn't present the 17th time we watch some shallow imitation of Rexy's roar, or Muldoon's demise, or Dennis Nedry's death at the hands of the Dilophosaurus. At the claws of the Dilophosaurus. And in part due to that fact, this scene actually has enough tension to at least hold its own against Rexy tearing into the jeeps or the velociraptors in the kitchen, both of course from the original Jurassic Park. And that's really high praise given that the original film is one of the greatest family films of all time. I understand that that's an opinion, but some opinions are just correct. The other key element here is the pacing of the painfully gradual chase, which stews us in our discomfort as it goes on and on and on and on and on, using uncharacteristically long takes, a slowly swelling yet bleak score, and the scene's general lack of speed to slowly overwhelm us with a powerful sense of dread. Wait.
See, the longer the note, the more dread.
God, that's terrible.
Anyway, despite the whole family film nobody good is going to die nature of Jurassic World Dominion, I felt a very definite tension in this scene that just kept on building and building and managed to punch through the otherwise very, safety net nature of the latest prehistoric blockbuster, ensuring that the Therizinosaurus stuck in my mind long after I'd left the cinema as the most formidable foe that the film had to offer. It sticks out in all of the best ways, and has easily earned its place on this list. Actually, weirdly, the Therizinosaurus sort of fulfills a similar role as the Seamstress from Shane Acker's 2009 masterpiece 9. Yes, I am happy to stick with that choice of words, even though I barely stumbled through a few of them. Both creatures are created by the main villains, serving as not the first but easily the most unsettling of their respective films' monsters, and hunt the heroes for small but memorable periods of time. In 9, we first get the Cat Beast and the Winged Beast, which stalk the Stitch Punks with a robotic determination that makes sense, I guess. But we then go from action horror to pure terror as the Seamstress enters the fold, lurking in the shadows, slithering like a snake, and picking off the protagonists one by one in the vein of a slasher villain like a Xenomorph or Freddy Krueger. It tears up the bodies of the fallen Stitch Punks, repurposing them into mesmerizing corpse lanterns so that it can swallow others into the gaping maws of its open ribcage, delivering death in a unique and unnerving manner that seems impossible for the dwindling, plucky group of glorified sock puppets to fight against, and which also led to a little me realizing that I have claustrophobia. And of course it has a terrifying doll's head with a classic case of the old Terminator eye because it wasn't creepy enough already. Apparently. I know that most people tend to prefer The Curse of the Black Pearl to the other Pirates of the Caribbean movies, but for me it's a great film that still doesn't come close to Dead Man's Chest. I don't have nearly enough time to explain every reason why in this video about movie monsters, but maybe it'll get its own devoted video someday. One major reason though, you'll get for free right now, and that is the application of the Kraken. This creature is, for me, an essential part of the Pirates of the Caribbean roster, striking terror into the hearts of the toughest, gruffest men all throughout the Seven Seas, and eliminating the cosmic underwater dread of the great unknown / bombinating beast, from the series of unfortunate events / all the wrong questions series from this list. And that's a tough task, trust me on that one. The concept of being unable to kill Davy Jones because it will set the creature free is an excellent piece of conflict between the heroes, and bizarrely goes to show that this mega marine monster is constantly lying at the back of their minds. Even Captain Jack Sparrow, who seems so drunkenly apathetic about almost everything in his world, wouldn't dare to unleash the Kraken upon the seas, presumably in large part due to the fact that it's perfectly poised to prey upon pirate kind. It lives in the ocean, which is more or less their home, and could emerge at any given moment, and when it does, it seems impossible to combat. And plot armor aside, it is. As soon as you see it, you are simply not going to survive. I mean, it's effectively a WMD in pirate form, able to devour entire ships in mere seconds, though usually picking people off one by one because, well, I guess because it's a lot more fun that way. For the viewers and for the beast itself. But there's also this historic sense of cosmic horror surrounding the Kraken, and the way that it seems to represent death on a wider scale. Great monsters in the sea have long captivated and terrified us, and the Kraken has always stood as perhaps the most notable example of that folklore and mythology. It's this great hulking existential threat that, thanks to its stellar use in Dead Man's Chest in particular, manages to turn sunny Caribbean seascapes into ticking time bombs that feel capable of unleashing Lovecraftian hell upon us at any moment. It's really not something you expect from films that were literally adapted from Disney rides, and bizarrely were parodied by LucasArts almost 13 full years before they came into existence.
Don't seem possible.
And speaking of Disney, to be honest, I'm not sure what I can say about Bill Cipher that hasn't already been said. He's the perfect evil god, capable of controlling time, reality, and our imaginations. He's the perfect villain, and his existence changes the fabric of Gravity Falls, turning it from a top-quality family-friendly show to one of the best animated series of all time, as he transforms it from
I successfully bezazzled my face! Blink!
into
I've got some children I need to make into corpses!
I mentioned the cosmic horror of a great marine beast, but Bill has the power to kill gods, tear through dimensions, and enact an apocalypse upon the world. He takes so much joy from every level of cruelty, from simply being mildly irritating all the way up to killing thousands, and he has the power to back it up too. Ford, the mysterious and all-knowing author of the journals that serve as Dipper's guide to the supernatural, is consistently terrified and enraged by Bill Cipher's existence and the threat that he poses. But the immense scale of having someone that knowledgeable so terrified of you aside, Bill also contributes to the show's excellent comedy with his panache and the humour that he finds in messing with his enemies. He is hilarious and endearing and smart and terrifying and infuriating and generally just a whole lot of fun. And I can't think of a better way to round off this group of 10 terrifying monsters in family-friendly fiction than to suggest that if you haven't seen this show, you go and give it a watch right now. Because you're worth it. Thanks for watching. Is there anyone or anything that I missed? Well, yes, absolutely. For instance, shortly after finishing this list I thought of the creepy old ice cream woman from the SpongeBob SquarePants movie, but I didn't want to replace any of what I've put so far, so I suppose you'll just have to go and watch that. I know I'm dishing out quite a lot of homework here, but don't worry, it's an excellent film. And that's actually something that I've noticed throughout the making of this video. Just how often these successful examples of children's horror manage to produce some of the creepiest and most emotionally effective monsters and stories out there. I suppose that when you can't rely upon intense violence or gore, or those traumatic primal fears that most horror these days is able to tap into, you have to come up with something that is more creative and considerate in its sinister presence than just another ghost haunting just another house. Well, I suppose that's what Constance is, but equally she's a lot more. A home, somewhere that should be safe, possessed by a murderous spirit violently defending the one person that ever saw her value, because the rage and self-loathing held on from the cruelty and the bullying that she suffered have long outlived and extended beyond even her physical form, let alone the characteristics that led those children to target her so viciously. Sorry, that was a heck of a tangent, but my point is, family-friendly horror is way cool, and if you like any of the examples on this list, you should definitely check out some more. But anyway, if you can think of other instances, or you had any thoughts on the examples that I've given, please do let me know in the comments below, and I'll make sure to get back to you. I really hope that you enjoyed this video, and seeing as you stuck around this far, I also hope that I will see you next time.